The Carnivortex, the Carnivortex. How did I get sucked into this Carnivortex? The Carnivortex, the Carnivortex. How did I get sucked into this Carnivortex? Beef, butter, bacon, eggs, eat fatty meat. Sounds great! The Carnivortex, the Carnivortex. How did I get sucked into this Carnivortex? The Carnivortex, the Carnivortex. Just give it a shot and you'll be carnivore next.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Carnivortex. I am your host, NoCarbBarb, and I, along with the HighFatCats, who are my managers, editors, and producers, bring you another exciting episode. Today, I am both privileged and honored to have as my guest Sally K. Norton. Now, I don't think she needs an introduction because if you don't know who Sally is, please go look her up right now. But Sally got her master's in public health after getting a nutrition degree from Cornell University. She, through her own health journey, has become the leading expert in dietary oxalates. She authored the 2023 book, Toxic Superfoods, How Oxalate Overload is Making You Sick and How to Get Better. Okay, Sally, did I say that correctly?
You did. Thank you. It's fun to be with you today.
Yes, I'm really excited to have you. Okay, and full disclosure, so Sally probably is not familiar with the Carnivortex and how odd I can be, but I did have the privilege of meeting her at Meatstock 2025 back in May, and I shared this with her, and I don't know if she remembers it or she may have just blocked it out, but I first came across Sally listening to the Genius Life podcast back in 2023. This is prior to me becoming carnivore. And Sally was on there and she was talking about how terrible spinach was for everybody. And I just really got ticked off. I'm like, are you serious? Okay, I get it. Dark chocolate may be good some days not. This, that, all these other dietary things. But spinach? You're going to take away my spinach and my spinach smoothie? I don't think so. And I shut it off. So fast forward, May of 2024, I found carnivore diet, realized that plants were really not a good idea. And then Sally came up on my feed again and I started listening and just realizing not only did she tell the truth, but that truth was affecting me in a major way. And cutting those oxalate-rich foods out of my diet was a game changer. So I don't know if you remember that, Sally, but that's my confession. I hated you for a little bit.
I'm used to that. But you convert Paul to Saul, you convert the deepest skeptic, and you have the most confident convert who has lived it. Like it took life experience with this new option to consider. Maybe the stuff that you were doing that wasn't working really wasn't working for a reason. And once you've lived that, it's really hard to go backwards. So it's good to be skeptical because you have to be really convinced and not just going with some kind of fad. You know?
Yes. And I'm just going to throw one other thing out to the audience about what I love about you is that, yes, you are a highly educated Ivy League trained expert, but your way of disseminating information is so straightforward and logical. I don't feel like I need to go get a degree to be able to understand what you're saying. And I really appreciate that. And I know my audience appreciates that.
That's wonderful. I would like to be a good educator. I would like people to be able to learn easily without struggle. That'd be nice.
Yes. Now, these guys, I don't know. I'm not sure that they're going to grasp what's happening.
They're naturally averse to eating a whole lot of spinach smoothies, though. They're smarter than that.
Yes, although I do have one guy who likes potatoes. So my husband is not carnivore, and anytime he has a bag of potato chips, this dude right here has his head in the bag.
Oh,
Now,
no.
I don't know what's wrong with him. He's an obligate carnivore. I guess that's him. It means, oh, I'm obligated to eat meat, but I want to eat potatoes. So I'm just going to throw that in there. So on my show, I always introduce a topic that comes somewhere from the recesses of my brain. And just thinking about you and all of the knowledge that you have, that the topic that I want to throw out there is super toxic. So I know that's kind of backwards from your toxic superfoods, but just when I throw that out, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Well, we are in a world where we have to be thinking about toxins. And you used to think of super fun sites, like some terrible place that was just leached in chemicals that came out of an old factory or an old gas station or something. And we call them super fund sites because it takes special, huge amount of money to clean them up and make them safe and uninhabitable. And unfortunately, we do live in a world there's a lot of toxicities in our lives, right? And from a humane side, it could be even in relationships. You can have people in your life that feel like they're really bad for your sense of peace and sense of confidence, and they're undermining you. And that's, you need to protect yourself from these super toxins. And unfortunately, when we don't know something's toxic and then someone's told you it's not and that it's safe for you and you need it, that is like a double toxicity because you're being kind of gaslit into doing a behavior that you wouldn't otherwise do if you weren't being essentially misinformed, which you could even accuse people of lying to you because they're not interested in getting their facts straight. We live in a world where super toxic can be quietly eroding your life and you have no idea. And so I myself didn't understand why I had health problems. And I came to understand in my late 30s or mid 30s that I was being poisoned by things like tampons. Like I was allergic to dioxin and rayon, allergic to rayon, a fabric. Like you could be allergic to it. And so I could see that these toxins were also acting as an immune system damaging thing. So I became much more aware of the fact that I was soaking in formaldehyde as a 12-year-old and those kinds of things. So I became involved in the world of environmental illness. And in the world I worked in holistic healthcare and integrative healthcare, we work with these chronically ill people who cannot figure out what's wrong with them. And some of them were poisoned by plastic factories or this and that. So we have potential for super toxic coming from relationships, from societal attitudes, from people's superior mentality, but also from industry and pollution. And then there's our healthy foods, the least suspected culprit of all. When you're looking for answers, clues as to what is murdering your health. So you're running this Agatha Christie movie in your own life going, what is murdering my health? And you try getting rid of the rayon and the dioxins and the formaldehyde and the laundry soap and the fragrances and the going out to the mall and quit going to Walmart. And you do everything you can and you're still not right. And new things keep happening. Well, that was the case for me. And unfortunately, it's the case for more and more people that can happen to. And because a lot of people are strongly kind of tolerating this at some level and medicating it with their alcohol and their habits and so on, they're not noticing it as well as dramatically as others are. And those people who are sick with, say, chemical sensitivity or some other mystery are not being treated with respect and not being treated as the canaries that might enlighten us. And that's happening with this oxalate toxicity too. So you can actually create a super toxic diet doing super healthy eating. Raw vegetables are loaded with oxalic acid and other problematic compounds. Cooked vegetables are still loaded with oxalic acid and other toxic compounds. So that's one example. The oxalates are an example of a toxin coming from nature. We forget that eating the wrong mushroom, if you go on a walk in the woods or weekend camping in the woods, you think, oh, I'm going to live off the land and be all natural and go gather some mushrooms. If you make a mistake and gather the wrong mushrooms, the rescue team might be finding a carcass instead of a living person who's dehydrated and sick because they couldn't find anything to eat out there in the woods. So we have to double back around to some is personal journey of recognizing that some of the stuff that we're accepting, like, oh, anything natural is safe, may not be good guidance for your long-term well-being. We really need to question some of these fundamental kind of attitudes we have in society. And I often think of it as sort of Disney-fied reality. To think that anything natural is safe, that's not the nature that scientists recognize. The Wild Kingdom was about, when I was a kid, there's this animal show about mostly African animals and their natural environment and how they're shredding each other to bits while they're alive to survive.
Well, and interestingly enough, if my memory serves me correctly, I think Wild Kingdom actually came on before The Wonderful World of Disney.
Back to back, right? Same time. They're actually polar opposites, right?
Yes. You brought up so many great points there and so much to dig into. Very interestingly, your mention of the super toxic relationships that we have with each other, but also with all of this other stuff, because I think that in our quest to be healthy, then we find ourselves in a relationship or feel like we're in a relationship with a laundry detergent, or I've got to break up with that one and I've got to go here. I've got to do these things.
True, though.
It is. And sometimes it's a grief process. I'm like, I have to give that up. What do you mean this isn't healthy? All the way for food and products and all of these things. You alluded to this a little bit, but Sally, will you tell me more about your personal story and journey and how you really arrived at this place?
Yeah, I was flabbergasted when I recognized that the things I had been trusting for a lifetime, like Swiss chard and sweet potatoes, were actually the culprit. Like, this is truly like the big reveal where you flunked on picking out the murderer. Like, I just had no idea. I thought sweet potatoes were this low allergy, safe food, and I was using them as a safe starch because I was allergic to beans and wheat and seeming grains generally. And so I was using sweet potatoes like people use bread and cereal and rice. Like, that was a survival food for me. And that was making things worse. And right from the beginning, if I had pieced together diet plus symptoms, diet change, symptoms get worse, I would have seen it, but I had no power to see it because in my head, this was a safe food. And that was when I really had that insight. It was the fall of 2013. And then when I really got going on taking that stuff in a more complete and consistent way was right around Thanksgiving of 2013. So it's been 12 years of getting over this mistake. But at the time, I was just completely floored. And my brain, it felt like it was like squeezing out of my ears. Like, how could this be that with all of my efforts to be nutrition conscious and all the dietary regimens I know, I'm very familiar with low oxalate diet from it being a kidney patient. If you have kidney patients, you need to be thinking about oxalates. Although a lot of dietitians are not and a lot of doctors are not. But that's what I learned in school. But that's not how it works out there in the real clinical world, which is interesting that we don't take some of what we learn in school is completely wrong. And some of what we learn in school is underappreciated. And that's certainly the toxicity of oxalates. We've known it. It's been in science for over 200 years. It's been heavily researched in all kinds of places, but not really looking at the impact on human health when you're eating it every day. So it's very underappreciated as a genuine hazard that's right there on our plates in the grab and go aisle, right there in the checkout aisle. It's dripping with oxalates, very popular and sold as healthy. And that's setting us up for big problems. So for me, I wasn't suspecting sweet potatoes and Swiss chard. I've been growing Swiss chard since I was 9, eating beet greens and things as a cherished summer food. My dad grew up on that stuff. He taught me to put vinegar on my greens. And it's like all wholesome and good and cheap and inexpensive and frugal and delicious and fresh and organic. What could be wrong with that? Well, it turns out you only need one bad trait to be a jerk. You know, you could have a letter in varsity, you could have straight A's, you can look really good, you can dress well and groom well. But if you're an alcoholic and a big jerk, you're still a done deal. You're still not the person I want to hang out with, right? So you can have pretty greenness and pretty fame and fortune, and yet you're still a jerk underneath. It only takes one fatal flaw, but we have this benefits only mindset where we want to like feature, oh, look at those A's, look at that beautiful coat. Like we want to envy and have the appearance of greatness and goodness and not really see the evil underneath. And that's what's happening with things like Swiss chard and spinach, beet greens, almonds, sweet potatoes, turmeric, these things that are high in oxalate that can undermine your health, especially if you start using them as your strategy for health. So you're using them routinely every day. You're building up a toxicity that can break you.
You said that you had already determined that wheat and gluten and soy were things that were not good. How did you arrive at the oxalate conclusion? What made you realize that, hey, although those other things are not great either, oxalates are really the reason that I'm sick?
Right. This is important, I think, to talk about as a case example. In 2009, I believe it was, I had a pretty unusual attack of genital pain that was for 2.5, 3 days, getting more and more intense and getting very distracting. And I was really struggling with the kind of pain and itchiness. And I was like, I actually had an outburst in the house. I said, somebody cut these off because I don't need genitals anymore. It was that bad. It was only a couple of days. That was really driving me crazy. My husband does an internet search on vulva pain and comes up with the Vulvar Pain Foundation. I'm like, there's a Vulvar Pain Foundation, and it was right down the road from where I worked. I worked at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill in the program in integrated medicine, putting on conferences and faculty training and doing all kinds of work to try to bring awareness of holistic healing and the kind of world of alternative and medicine that could be complementary to what we do in standard healthcare, in trying to affect the curriculum in the medical school, the dental school, the nursing profession, and so on. And I didn't know about the Vulvar Pain Foundation until I left North Carolina. And I'm like, well, that's weird. And she teaches not only you change your diet and get rid of these high oxalate foods as much as you can to address genital pain for both men and women and bladder problems and urinary tract problems. And it turns out connective tissue problems. So if you have connective tissue issues or syndrome or, like what's a connective tissue disorder? I wasn't even aware of such a concept at the time, but I had all the signs of it. I certainly had connective tissue issues. And I seem to fit what she's describing, but based on her stuff, I couldn't fully get how that didn't make sense to me. But I did learn more. Thank you to Joanne Yan and the Vulvar Pain Foundation, because they have spent years testing foods. So they have a much better track record in terms of caring about what has high oxalates. So they made it more possible to do a very low oxalate diet outside of carnivore. Now, carnivore is a zero oxalate diet because there are practically zero oxalates in all meat foods. There might be a little bit of oxalate in tuna, but I think we need more tests on that. But basically, animal foods are essentially free of oxalate. And you need to eat enough to have it really matter. You can have 50 milligrams a day or whatever, and it generally is fine. In fact, we're built to tolerate 150 milligrams a day, maybe 200 in some people. A bigger person might tolerate more. So we can have some. In the past, no one ever did a truly low oxalate diet because we didn't have the data for it. But between the carnivore movement and the Vulva Pain Foundation making it possible to really know much more about how much oxalate you're consuming, we can see new things occurring with the body that is truly revealing more and more science that just hasn't been captured and really written up in the medical literature. So we're out here observing things that then you go back in the literature and you're like, oh, that you can see it all laid out because oxalate has been in the literature for 200 years. And so in my case, I was aware now of oxalates, but it seemed like I couldn't tell I was getting better because I'm still oxalate poisoned. She didn't explain that well in terms of just because you stop eating it doesn't mean you're solved. The problem's not solved because you have a bioaccumulation buildup in your body from years of eating potatoes, dark chocolate, peanut butter, whole grains, blackberries, sweet potatoes, white potato, the 3 leafy greens that are high in oxalate, just 3, Swiss chard, beets, and spinach. Kale's not high, just to clarify another myth out there. So there's various high oxalate foods that are too much in our diet all the time. And so we tend to build it up in our thyroid gland, our eyes, the brain, the bones, the bone marrow, the kidneys, and throughout. And it's affecting connective tissues and joints. So I didn't understand that you may not feel that much better when you get rid of oxalate out of your diet. And I couldn't really tell. And it seemed like when I ate sweet potatoes, they didn't bother me. In fact, they probably made me feel slightly worse. Another major concept that I did not understand, that if you put some oxalate back in your diet, you can actually start to feel better temporarily, but you're going back to ultimately the same problem. So I didn't have that understanding in 2009. So I started trying to figure out why I wasn't sleeping properly. A sleep exam demonstrated that I had 29 brain arousals every single hour overnight. So I was not sleeping at all, like 2 minutes of sleep, and that was it. And it was ruining my functioning. I could hardly get anything done. I couldn't read the mail. I couldn't focus. I had to quit my job, had bleeding fibroids that were small, but killing me, making me anemic. And it was terrible. So I had to give up my career, couldn't sleep, bleeding to death, back pain, falling apart. And I was trying to solve that. And my research suggested that it was dysbiosis and SIBO, or small bowel overgrowth of bacteria. So things are backing up from the colon in some people. And I had a test for it, said, no, you didn't have that. But I didn't have any other explanation in the literature why I wasn't sleeping. It was some kind of toxicity that they know, and they think it's endotoxemia. So I treated myself that with medication. And of course, it didn't help because that wasn't the problem. So I was adding in kiwi in order to improve my bowel health, because the kiwi people in New Zealand are trying to make a point that you can use kiwi for constipation and other things because it's loaded with oxalates. It's loaded with oxalate crystals. These little toothpicks are uber tiny groups of like 200 of them, little vacuoles in the cells, designed as double pointed poison arrows to damage those, to protect the seeds in the kiwi. You start eating kiwi every day, again, back on the oxalates, and a little bit of celery juice in with like the lettuce and cucumber juice, because I knew to not juice spinach and chard and stuff like that. But it was enough oxalate that summer in 2013, I was getting more and more pain and getting stiffer and stiffer. And I go to this hot yoga class that has the same routine every single time. And from that summer all the way through October, I was getting worse. I was turning 80, 85, 86, 87. Every week I was getting older and older and getting stiffer and less able to do the yoga. Stuff I'd been doing for quite a while. At that point, I'd done that particular routine for about 6 years. And I was losing my ability to do it. And I was laying in bed one night, back with the old arthritis I used to have when I was a vegetarian and when I was a vegan. I had a lot of arthritic pain through my 20s. And it was coming back, and I was laying there thinking, what the heck is going on? I can hardly move in yoga class. My arthritis is driving me crazy. I'm having trouble falling asleep. I'm laying in bed going, what have I done? And it dawned on me, the kiwi, the celery, every single day was oxalate dosing me. And it was literally my food that I had been eating my lifetime that had caused decades of suffering. That's why it just blew my mind, because I didn't have to have all that arthritis. I didn't have to have all that disability. I did not have to leave Cornell for a 4-year medical leave of absence for foot surgery. It turned out that all of that stuff was my healthy diet.
Did that just really make you mad when you figured that out?
Oh, yeah. It's so painful to have given up any ability to have athletics. Like, I have not been able to go barefoot and I've been so restrained about what I could do with energy, thinking, my feet, athleticism. All of those things had been stolen from me because I was eating Swiss chard. Like, that is so unfair. So my bigger concern, though, pretty quickly, I'm like, I've been surrounded by medical people. I've worked in 2 medical schools. And when I was in the program of integrated medicine, not only did I have doctors that I could just talk in the hallway, like, hey, this hurts, what do you do? Oh, get surgery. Oh, well, maybe. And then I have all these massage therapists, acupuncturists, herbalists, homeopaths, chiropractors, like all those folks. I worked with them. I had a personal relationship with them. None of us, I have a degree in nutrition and public health and no integrative and holistic healing. None of us, the MDs, the chiropractors, the naturopaths, and myself, none of us knew how to fix me. A couple of them thought they could. And I was always the one that brought them to tears, as my husband used to say. Well, look out for Sally. She brings everyone to tears because you will not. And I've literally had people tell me, Sally, I can't do anything more for you with tears. Like they were so disappointed their stuff was supposed to work because they don't know about oxalates. So I knew, like, holy cow, I can't be the only person in the world who is making this mistake and who has pain issues, urinary issues, sleep issues, you name it, thyroid problems, tooth problems, bleeding problems because of their diet. So I felt an obligation, my world of public health nutrition, the whole point of it, of my career, was to help people not get sick. And I finally found a way to help people not get sick. And so it's been my personal and professional mission to be a little tiny lighthouse over here on the shores of, like, don't kill yourself on oxalates. Hello, be aware there's a danger here. And I just wanted to be that little warning signal that says, if you are eating this way and you don't feel good, this is an opportunity to solve your problems, potentially. And it's been a big surprise to me how many, I thought I was like a special breed. It turns out that it seems like 1 in 4 people that cross my path are eating high oxalate foods and are complaining of conditions that it can create. It's incredibly common, which is a disappointment, to be sure, but a huge opportunity. The best biohack is cheap and easy. There's nothing cheaper and easier than skipping the spinach and the sweet potatoes and the almonds. Like, that is cheap. It doesn't require you to buy a $10,000 device and go into appointments over and over again. It is available to anyone who's willing to do it.
Thank you. Thank you for your willingness to take your journey and realize that wasn't just for you, that it's for everybody and helping so many people, because I know there are so many of us that are the ones that have made our doctors cry or laugh or get up in disgust when they go, I just don't know. You're the healthiest sick person I've ever seen. I don't know what's wrong with you. Sorry. You know, don't eat meat, it causes cancer, and it kick you out. I mean, that kind of thing. And I just really appreciate that. And I appreciate your heart because, you know, and to my audience, I mean, Sally is a big deal. Barb is not a big deal, like very small viewership, but she's willing to help one person at a time. And it's just the impact of that is just really powerful. So I totally appreciate that. So coming from the carnivore way of eating, which most people who listen to me are, but to me, not everyone has to be carnivore, and there's definitely a spectrum even in this realm. The topic of oxalate dumping comes up a lot, and especially for people who are newly converting to a carnivore diet, and then some further on in their journey. Can you please explain what oxalate dumping is and how you can identify that you might have it?
Yes, this is so important because this is where I didn't understand why I could still feel bad when I got rid of the Swiss chard and sweet potatoes and so on. And so this is revealing something that science is unaware of. That's where we're really living science, because in the medical literature, they tend to repeat what somebody wrote and someone else wrote and someone else wrote. So they don't check their facts. They just keep repeating what it's very much like rumor. So they're all telling themselves that this bioaccumulation of oxalate in the bones, bone marrow, tissues, tendons, eyes, eyeballs, teeth, sinuses, and so on, thyroid gland, this only occurs with renal failure, meaning when your kidneys quit removing it from your blood, then it backs up in your system. But the truth is that the science does show that with very healthy kidneys, oxalate backs up in the system. And there's been a handful of rat-based studies to show that you really can't fill up a human being, put oxalic acid into their bloodstream, and then cut up their body parts and measure their oxalates in there. You can't do that with a human being. In fact, when we do it with rats, we do it with radioactive oxalates, so we can use a radioactive scanner to see where those deposits are because they're too small to see. And you can't possibly dissect an entire rat. Even a tiny rat is still too much tissue to put 2,000 slides of tissues under the microscope. You can't really measure oxalic acid or the calcium oxalate crystals it forms that are in your tissues. So this is a big deal that we are bioaccumulating oxalates in our tissues and we don't know it. And medicine is completely convinced that this doesn't happen. So this is our biggest barrier, but you can prove that science if you start seeing these outward signs of oxalate being released from the body when you're not eating it. See, when you're not eating it, that makes it possible for your body to get rid of it. And that's a concept, too, that's a little tricky to think about. So if we think about the bloodstream is the roadway upon which oxalate is delivered into your tissues. It's coming from your food and gets into your blood, goes to your liver. The liver adds more oxalate. The liver does not detox oxalate in any way, shape, and form. In fact, it produces a small amount of oxalate. So the oxalate that came out of your spinach smoothie and your almond bread and your keto this and that are dark chocolate, or even your regular like Pringles, like the cat and cat's daddy's potato chip little secret moments, that is a high oxalate moment for sure. Very soluble, and solubility is a factor that makes oxalic acid get into the bloodstream easily. So those potato chips and their oxalate go to liver, come out, go around the body, and get pushed out under high pressure into tissues, and tends to hang up in areas where there's regenerating tissue. Those new cells are sticky to oxalate. There's dying tissue that those dead cells can't defend themselves from oxalate. Bits of vascular material, that's the sort of subcellular organelle bits, that is very sticky to oxalate. In fact, causes the acid to precipitate out into crystals, and you get this deposits through the body. So now, if you're over 10 years old and you grew up in a world that eats peanut butter and whole wheat and potatoes and potato products and chocolate, most of us get chocolate cake when we turn 1 and start being given, nowadays they're being given peanut butter as one of their first foods. So you can't even get out of pre-verbal life without oxalates in your body, or you may not even get out of the uterus without oxalates in your body if the mother's eating a lot of oxalate, or if she quit eating oxalates on carnivore, she could be moving oxalates back out of her bones back into her bloodstream. So this is the thing. Your blood, if it's high in oxalate coming from your Pringles habit or your dark chocolate or your keto bread, then your body doesn't have any room to put it back into your bloodstream because it's so toxic. If too much is in the bloodstream, it will take the calcium out of your blood and you'll have a heart block, heart attack, or stroke. Or you'll ruin your immune system or ruin your vascular system, and it'll cause vascular damage and ruin your capillary beds. You cannot do that. You'll go blind and have problems. So your body is required to hold on to it until the blood level clears out. So now you get the traffic out of the streets of the blood vessels, and now you have room to put it back in there. So you will start moving it out of your thyroid gland or whatever. And that can load up the bloodstream and cause these hypocalcemia moments where your blood calcium is vacillating. And sometimes you have symptoms, like I say, arrhythmias, high blood pressure. Those can be signs of oxalate clearing, which you can also sometimes see it in the outward tissues. If you pee cloudy urine, that's called crystalluria. Those are probably, unless you have severe sepsis and you have a kidney infection for sure, where you've got bacteria shedding and you're shedding a lot of cells from the bladder, usually cloudy urine is an indicator of crystals in the urine. And that could be calcium oxalate crystals forming in the urine. I used to have cloudy urine all the time. Almost every sample I turned in when I had a urine test at a physical, which used to happen in the 80s and 90s, and people don't do that very much anymore, urine samples. But if you see slightly opaque urine, that could be a sign of oxalate coming out of the body. If you have a lot of tartar on the teeth, that's a sign of high oxalate in the bloodstream. If you have a lot of grit stuff coming out of your eyes and glued to your face in the morning, that could be a sign of oxalate coming out of the body. If you get rashes, heat rashes, itchy rashes, non-itchy rashes, little boils, little blood spots like poking out, stuff shedding off the skin, white dust, maybe like 20% of people who do this oxalate clearing get some kind of skin symptom, but a lot of us do not. Some of us will get a lot of cloudy urine. Other people will get the tartar on the teeth more. These are all outward signs of oxalate coming out of the tissues. Now, if you go back like I did and reintroduce your sweet potatoes, you can shut that off, right? So we can use oxalate foods like tea, beet juice, a little rhubarb jam, a little bit of maybe plantain chips, these high oxalate foods, we can use them as medication to tell the body to not put stuff back into the bloodstream and not make me sick because, hey, I'm eating it again. So if we do enough of that in the right way, in a kind of deliberate way, we can help manage this a little bit. And so if you go really zero oxalate, oftentimes you get into these clearing cycles, these clearing episodes that can be illness. Like I call it clearing illness often because it can make you feel like you got a stomach bug. It can make your mood really change. You can get anxiety. You can lose your focus in life. You can become apathetic and have trouble sleeping. You can become irritable. So if you see a big mood shift, that could be a sign of neurotoxicity, and the neurotoxicity could be a result of high oxalate levels moving around and the inflammation that's required in order to get it out of tissues. So it just doesn't fall out of tissues. It's being held and managed by immune cells and by cellular mechanisms, and the body is deliberately having to make a decision to go after those things and deliberately change, like the cells change what receptors and what molecules they make and what they're doing from a sequestration and hold on to it mode to a deaccumulation mode. That takes 3 days of metabolism just to do that. So there's usually a honeymoon when you start a low or zero oxalate diet where you feel pretty darn good for 3 days, 5 days, 2 weeks. And then oftentimes, I would say in at least half the cases, within 2 weeks, you can tell, like, wait a minute, this isn't so good anymore. And that could be the oxalates stirring up again. And that can come and go in ways that are a little tricky to understand. So it takes some kind of learning process to figure it out. And some people, I've been surprised in the carnivore world how many people do not do this clearing illness early on. Some people, it takes 2, 3, 4, even 6 years. And then all of a sudden, they're in this oxalate clearing mode and they realize, oh, this is brutal. So just because you're spared from having it early in the game doesn't mean it isn't probably an issue, because we live in this modern plant-based world that loves our peanuts and potatoes and chocolate. And that's probably enough to say, you're going to be doing some deaccumulation. And sometimes it's really subtle. It can be just hips bothering you or different joints bothering you more, like a little carpal tunnel, back pain, knee pain, trouble in the mid back. That could be kidney issues, because the kidneys is the first tissue that really needs to unload. The kidneys are loaded with oxalates. It's called nephrocalcinosis. It's very common. And they've been holding on to oxalates, waiting for a moment when they can clean up. And so you clean up your diet. You might need a year or a year and a half to really get the kidneys and the vascular system happy enough where this oxalate deaccumulation can start progressing. Yeah.
Wow. It is very counterintuitive to think, okay, to be able to slow this dumping down, I need to intake some of it. So, for someone who thinks they might be experiencing oxalate dumping, I've heard it said that, hey, just introduce a little bit of oxalate and see if that helps. And if it does, then you know you're on the right track. Do you agree with that?
Well, a little bit is often misunderstood, and people think that just plants are oxalates, so therefore any old plants, and they'll start serving themselves up a half cup of cauliflower and think, well, that's good enough. I'm getting my oxalates. Well, there's almost no oxalates in cauliflower, especially a half cup. So you have to do it in a way that's going to have a signal. We're trying to create a metabolic signal to tell the body, hey, here's incoming oxalates, and it has to be enough. If a food has 1 milligram of oxalate, you only absorb 1 milligram. You probably won't absorb anything from that if it's that low. You need probably 30 or 50 milligrams of oxalate, but it has to be fairly soluble, like in a tea. Potatoes are pretty soluble. The beet juice, something watery like that, that's a good soluble. And so a fair amount will be absorbed quickly in the stomach. It doesn't get to the colon to be bothered to. It gets absorbed pretty quickly, especially if it's in a liquid matrix like a tea. So if you do 2 tea bags, sometimes that's enough. And you can tell within an hour, hey, things are calming down. If it doesn't work, next time, try a little more. But don't just dabble with, I added a romaine salad, there's a little oxalates in there.
That's a really good advice. Thank you. I have a question that I like to ask all of my guests. I know you have had a myriad of interviews. Has there ever been a question that you wish someone had asked you?
Well, I would love to hear people say, how can we team up as a community and really be taken seriously? How can we change the world together?
That's an excellent question. How would you answer it in 1 minute or less? How can you answer that question?
Well, I really think we need to keep giving each other a voice and really giving this topic the time. I think we all need to really learn. I really tried to put so much data and information in my book without making it feel data heavy. It's readable, but that means a lot of stuff is hidden in a fairly simple couple sentences. You may be really not fully getting it. So I would start with, please become a student of this topic. And I've really, as the Oxalate teacher, tried to make the book serve doctors and regular people who barely finished high school be able to really gain some valuable information. So if we could really get our facts straight, a lot of people are out there saying spinach and kale and spinach high in oxalates. The oxalate message is getting out. It has got a life of its own now. It is the anti-nutrient of the day, and skeptical people are really trying to like debunk this as if it's not true. And we have to be able to stand up against that and know when someone's debunking is debunked. Like it is bunk itself. Like people are saying cooking kills oxalate, so therefore get your almonds roasted. Well, according to 8 tests of oxalate content that are published actual data, not just junk on the internet, but looking at primary source, 8 tests suggest that roasted almonds have 470 milligrams per 100 grams of nuts versus raw, which has 410. So actually the roasted has more oxalate, the cooked ones, than the raw ones do. But people are being allowed to publish in mainstream publications claiming that cooking solves the oxalate problem, and it does not. They're getting away with a mainstream attitude without actually having to back it up with science. We who are coming out with a fresh perspective have to show the science over and over again. So be with me and showing the science, getting your facts straight, and start with the book, and not just Toxic Superfoods, but my data companion. That's where you can find all the references for the data. You can get some useful, a lot of explanation about the data in the front so you understand how data is being used and abused and wrong. And I have blog posts to that effect. And you can see the color-coded categorization of foods with oxalate and specific references all in one place. Get sciencey enough to be able to stand up to fraudulent information so that we really can change the world.
And I understand you also have a cookbook coming out.
I have a cookbook on my website, and I'm developing a second edition that will look like this in terms of being spiral bound, easy to use, slip openable, and so on, and with more recipes and a little cuter formatting. My current one is a little annoying. I had to do that in a hurry to get it done before so I could have some time to write Toxic Superfoods. So that's coming out. And there'll be some more cookbooks coming out in mainstream press. We have 8 languages now in Toxic Superfoods. So we've got French, Polish, German, Chinese, quite a few languages, in Spanish, and it's coming out in Vietnamese as well, and maybe a couple of others. So this is an opportunity to have a global conversation about some basic things that ultimately all it requires is a little bit of attention, not a lot of money. So you don't need a lot of resources because it's not expensive to get equipped with knowledge, really, these days.
Gosh, that is absolutely fantastic. And I know in the interest of time, we've got to stop, but I think we could do another 10 episodes of the Carnivortex just on this, Sally. I love talking with you. And you're so informative. And I want to help spread the message because I think most people don't understand it. And you're making that easy for us to digest and understand. And I just so appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to have a friend like you.
Happy Thanksgiving, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
We will.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to take the time to let you know that Catman, who is kind of my silent producer behind the scenes, felt very strongly that I needed to come on and do an additional clip just saying that Sally K. Norton's information is in the show notes. So all of her detailed links and just info to get to her website, all of that is listed below. So appreciate having her on. And thank you, Catman, for letting me know that he's a little camera shy. I hope everyone has a great day.